It was a quiet evening on the small, remote planet of Terra 9. The skies were clear, with the soft light of distant stars shining down on the peaceful landscape. Ethan, a young man in his late 20s, sat by the window of his small house, looking out at the vast, unchanging horizon. He lived an ordinary life, working as a mechanic in the town, fixing machines and helping his neighbors. He had no idea that today would be the day that would change everything forever. Ethan had always been curious, a trait that often got him into trouble. As a child, he would ask questions about everything, wanting to know how the world worked and why things were the way they were. But as he grew older, he settled into a life of routine. Still, that curiosity never fully disappeared. It was a part of him. On this evening, as he sat staring at the stars, Ethan saw something strange. A light, brighter than any star, streaked across the sky. It was unlike any shooting star he had ever seen. This light was not just passing by. It was falling, fast. His heart raced as he watched it crash in the distance, sending up a massive plume of dust and debris. Curiosity took hold of him once again. Without thinking, Ethan grabbed his jacket, slammed the door shut behind him, and raced toward the crash site. He had no idea what he would find, but something deep inside told him he had to see it for himself. The journey was long, and the terrain was rough, but Ethan pressed on. The night air was cold against his skin, but it only fueled his determination. He finally reached the crash site just before dawn. The area was eerily quiet, the only sound being the distant hum of wind across the rocky landscape. In the middle of a large crater lay the wreckage of what appeared to be a ship, though it was unlike any ship Ethan had ever seen. It was sleek, metallic, and glowing faintly with a strange blue light. The ship was partially buried in the earth, with jagged pieces of metal scattered around the site. Ethan stepped forward cautiously, feeling a strange sense of unease. As he got closer, he noticed a crack in the side of the ship, and through it, he could see something inside. His curiosity pushed him forward, and with trembling hands, he reached for the edge of the crack. Suddenly, the ship seemed to hum to life, and a low rumble shook the ground beneath him. Ethan jumped back, startled, but the ship's glow grew brighter, and the sound became louder. Then, without warning, the crack widened, and the entire side of the ship split open, revealing a glowing, circular artifact inside. It was made of an unknown material, shining with an intense, otherworldly light. The energy it radiated was unlike anything Ethan had ever felt. It seemed to pulse with life, almost as if it were alive itself. Without thinking, Ethan reached out and touched the artifact. The moment his fingers made contact, a surge of energy shot through his body. His entire being was filled with an overwhelming rush of power, unlike anything he had ever imagined. He felt his body tense, his heart racing as the energy flowed through him. His mind was flooded with strange images of distant galaxies, alien landscapes, and battles fought by ancient warriors. Before he could fully comprehend what was happening, the world around him began to blur, and he collapsed to the ground, unconscious. When Ethan woke up, he was no longer lying on the cold, rocky ground. Instead, he found himself in a small, dimly lit room. He tried to move, but his body felt strange, heavier, stronger, as if the very air around him had changed. His senses were sharper. His hearing was clearer. He could even feel the tiniest movements in the air. He sat up quickly, panic setting in, but the room was silent. Suddenly, he heard a sound, the sound of his own breathing. But it wasn't just his breathing. It was as if he could hear everything. The pulse of his heartbeat, the hum of the electricity in the walls, the distant chirping of insects outside. His senses were heightened to an incredible degree. Ethan jumped to his feet, looking around the room. It was small and plain, with metal walls and a faint glow coming from the cracks in the ceiling. The only thing in the room with him was the artifact. It sat on a pedestal in the center of the room, glowing with the same strange light it had emitted earlier. He slowly approached it, reaching out to touch it again. The moment his fingers brushed against its surface, the artifact responded, releasing a pulse of energy that filled the room. Ethan staggered back, his mind reeling with the influx of knowledge. He now understood what the artifact was. It was an ancient relic, an incredibly powerful device created by a civilization long gone. Its purpose was to unlock the hidden potential in the beings it chose, and it had chosen him. His body felt different, stronger. He could feel the power coursing through his veins, the energy that had once overwhelmed him now under his control. Ethan's mind raced with the possibilities. He was no longer just a mechanic from a small planet. He was something more, something far more powerful than he could have ever imagined. But as the realization hit him, another thought followed. Who else knew about this artifact? What did they want with it? And why had it chosen him? As the questions flooded his mind, a sudden realization struck him. His life would never be the same again, outside. The sky was beginning to brighten as the first rays of sunlight peeked over the horizon. But for Ethan, this was no longer the dawn of a new day. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous and exciting. He was no longer just a man. He was the chosen one, the wielder of an ancient, unimaginable power. And he had no idea what lay ahead. The first few days after the artifact changed Ethan were a blur. He had trouble grasping the reality of what had happened, constantly questioning his own sanity. His senses had become sharper, and every detail of the world around him felt different, louder, brighter, more vivid. His body was stronger, faster, and more responsive than ever before. But the most unsettling part was the constant hum of energy that buzzed in the back of his mind. It felt like the artifact was calling to him, urging him to explore its power. Despite the overwhelming sensation of power coursing through his veins, Ethan kept his distance from the artifact, afraid of what might happen if he touched it again. He didn't understand its true purpose, and deep down, he feared what would become of him if he fully embraced its power. But the doubts gnawed at him. It was as if a part of him already knew that the artifact was meant for something greater than himself. One evening, as he sat alone in his house, trying to make sense of everything, a strange transmission came through on his old communication device. The screen flickered to life, and a crackling voice echoed through the room, low and distorted. "Ethan, we know what you found. The artifact. It has chosen you. You are not alone. Others like you are awakening. But you must prepare. The galaxy is not at peace." Ethan froze, his heart pounding. The message was from someone who knew him, who knew what he had discovered. Before he could respond, the transmission cut off, leaving only silence in its wake. The next day, he decided to investigate. He couldn't ignore the warning, not when it felt so urgent. The voice on the transmission hadn't been human, but it didn't matter. Someone out there knew about the artifact, and that knowledge would lead him to answers. He returned to the crash site where he had found the artifact, hoping to uncover more clues. As he arrived, he noticed something he hadn't before. The ship had shifted slightly. The wreckage, though mostly intact, seemed to hum with energy. The cracks in its structure were pulsing, as if the ship itself was alive, responding to something or someone. The moment Ethan stepped closer to the wreckage, a chill ran down his spine. He could feel the presence of something watching him. He wasn't alone. Suddenly, a powerful blast of energy shot up from the center of the crash site, lighting up the sky in a blinding flash. Ethan barely had time to react as a massive shadow loomed over him. He looked up to see a gigantic ship descending, its dark hull cutting through the sky like a predator stalking its prey. Before he could even comprehend what was happening, the ground shook beneath him as alien soldiers began to descend, their advanced technology gleaming in the dim light. They were unlike anything Ethan had ever seen, tall, armored, and terrifying. Their eyes glowed with a menacing red hue, and their weapons were unlike anything humanity had ever produced. Ethan felt a surge of fear, but it quickly turned into something else, something stronger. The artifact's power was awakening within him, filling him with the drive to fight. Without thinking, he reached for the weapon at his side, but it wasn't there. Then, in a burst of energy, he felt something shift inside him. He could feel the power of the artifact coursing through his body, and before he knew it, a blinding light erupted from his hands. The alien soldiers froze for a moment, staring at him in disbelief. But it was too late. Ethan's mind, now fully connected with the artifact, guided his every movement. In a blur of speed, he launched himself into the air, dodging blasts of alien energy, his body moving as if it were part of the very wind. The first soldier fell with a single swipe of his arm, as if Ethan were a whirlwind of destruction. The others hesitated for just a fraction of a second. That was all he needed. He moved like lightning, his body reacting faster than his mind could process. The aliens had advanced technology, but it was no match for Ethan's newfound strength and speed. One by one, the alien soldiers fell. The power of the artifact surged through him, making him nearly invincible. His mind raced with knowledge, advanced combat tactics, ancient languages, and techniques that felt like they belonged to a time long past. With each alien that fell, his confidence grew. He had no idea what this power was, but it was undeniably his now. The battle raged for what seemed like hours. The alien ship above him fired powerful energy blasts, but Ethan dodged them effortlessly. The aliens tried to regroup, but they were no match for him. It was as though the universe itself had conspired to give him the strength to face them, finally. The last of the alien soldiers lay defeated, their bodies scattered across the rocky landscape. Ethan stood alone in the wreckage, panting heavily, his heart racing. He could feel the power of the artifact coursing through him. But there was something more, something dark and ancient, waiting to be unleashed. As he stood there, catching his breath, a voice echoed in his mind, cold and commanding. It was not his own voice. The artifact's presence was stronger than ever, and it spoke directly to him. Ethan, you have only just begun. The galaxy is full of enemies far more powerful than the ones you have just defeated. You are a weapon, chosen for a purpose, but there is much more to learn. A shiver ran down his spine. The voice faded, leaving Ethan standing in the quiet aftermath of the battle, his thoughts swirling with the weight of what he had just experienced. For the first time, he understood the gravity of the situation. He was no longer just a man. He was something much more. And if the galaxy was truly in danger, there would be no one else to stop it. Ethan's journey had only just begun, and he knew one thing for certain. The enemies of the galaxy would soon know his name, and he would stop them all, no matter the cost. But as he walked away from the battlefield, a new question haunted him. Who else had awakened the artifact's power? And what would happen when they found out about him? The days after the battle were both a blur and a time of clarity for Ethan. As he continued to train and explore the extent of the power the artifact had bestowed upon him, something inside him grew stronger, but it was also unsettling. The force inside him wasn't just a gift. It was a bond, one that tied him to something far beyond his understanding. The artifact was more than a tool. It was a force, an entity with its own will, its own purpose, and it seemed to want Ethan to fulfill a role far greater than he ever imagined. Ethan had returned to the small town where he grew up, though he felt like a stranger now. People greeted him with nervous smiles, unaware of the changes he had undergone. His neighbors, those he had known since childhood, went on with their lives as if nothing had changed. But to Ethan, everything had changed. The power that had awakened within him was both a blessing and a curse, and he wasn't sure how much longer he could control it. One evening, as Ethan was walking along the outskirts of the town, he saw something that made his blood run cold. A figure, tall and cloaked in shadow, stood at the edge of the horizon. The figure didn't move, but Ethan could feel its presence, a dark energy unlike anything he had ever encountered. His heart pounded in his chest as the figure slowly turned toward him, and in that moment, Ethan knew that the danger was far from over. The figure spoke without moving its lips, its voice entering Ethan's mind. You think you are the only one who has awakened, human? The voice was cold, full of disdain. There are others, far older, far more powerful than you. You are but a pawn in a game you do not understand. Ethan's grip tightened around the weapon he had taken from the crash site, his instinct screaming for him to strike. But he hesitated. The energy coming from the figure was unlike anything he had ever felt. It was ancient, dark, and unyielding. Whatever this being was, it was more than just an alien soldier. It was a force unto itself. What do you want? Ethan demanded, his voice steady but tinged with uncertainty. The figure stepped closer, its form becoming clearer as it approached. It wasn't human, nor was it any alien race Ethan had ever encountered. Its body was elongated and skeletal, with a blackened, reflective surface that seemed to shimmer like molten metal. The eyes glowed an eerie violet, filled with an intelligence that was both terrifying and ancient. "I seek what you have, human." The power of the artifact, the figure said, its voice resonating in Ethan's mind like a deep echo. "It is not meant for your kind. It was created for those far greater than you, those who have long since transcended this weak existence." Ethan's mind raced. He could feel the artifact's presence within him, pushing him to act, to fight. But there was something different about this encounter. He wasn't just facing an alien invader. This was something older, something more dangerous. And the artifact, it seemed, had its own intentions. "What are you?" Ethan asked, the question slipping from his lips before he could stop it. "Why do you want the artifact?" The figure tilted its head, as if amused by Ethan's ignorance. "I am a Vazu, a being born of the fabric of the universe itself. We are the architects of life and death, the creators of the first stars, and we have waited for eons for the artifact to reveal itself. It is the key to a power beyond anything you can imagine, the key to remaking the galaxy in our image." Ethan's mind whirled as the figure's words sank in. A Vazu, the name sounded like a legend, something ancient and long forgotten. The Vazu spoke of remaking the galaxy, of reshaping reality itself. But the artifact was no mere tool of destruction. It had chosen Ethan, and now, it seemed, something far darker wanted it for itself. Without thinking, Ethan reached out to the artifact, feeling its power pulse through him. It responded immediately, but instead of its usual surge of energy, this time it felt different. It felt like a warning, a signal of something far greater that Ethan was not yet prepared to face. The Vazu's eyes narrowed. "You think you can control it, don't you? You think it is yours. But the artifact belongs to the Elder Ones, the creators of all things. It was never meant to be wielded by a fragile human like you." Ethan's fingers tightened around the weapon at his side. His heart beat faster, adrenaline pumping through his veins. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. This was a battle for control of something far greater than either of them. Without warning, the Vazu lunged, its form blurring with inhuman speed. Ethan barely had time to react. The ground beneath his feet cracked as he rolled out of the way just in time, narrowly avoiding the Vazu's strike. The creature's long limbs struck like tendrils of shadow, each movement calculated, precise, and devastating. Ethan sprang to his feet, his body moving faster than it had ever moved before. He could feel the power of the artifact surging within him, guiding his every move. But it wasn't enough. The Vazu was too fast, too strong. It seemed to anticipate Ethan's every action, its violet eyes glowing with predatory intent. The Vazu's voice echoed in Ethan's mind again, louder this time. A voice filled with contempt. "You cannot defeat me, human. You cannot even understand the power you wield." Ethan gritted his teeth, his mind racing. The artifact's power was growing stronger within him, but he was struggling to control it. The Vazu's words, his disdain, his threat, it all seemed to pull at something deep within Ethan, something he had yet to fully understand. Suddenly, the artifact surged again, filling Ethan with a burst of energy so powerful it felt like his very bones were vibrating. His eyes glowed with the same violet light that filled the Vazu's. And for the first time since he had discovered the artifact, Ethan felt something shift inside him. He wasn't just using the artifact's power anymore. He had become one with it. With a roar, Ethan launched himself at the Vazu, every movement a blur of raw strength and speed. The battle was no longer a fight for survival. It was a battle for control of the very power that had awakened inside him. And this time, Ethan wasn't going to back down. He would make his stand, and he would fight with everything he had. The quiet after the battle was unsettling. Ethan stood amidst the wreckage, his body still pulsing with energy from the confrontation with the Vazu. The dark figure had vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving Ethan standing alone, staring at the remnants of the landscape he once knew. The ground was scorched, and the air was thick with the aftermath of their battle. But despite the victory, there was no sense of triumph, only a growing sense of dread. As the days passed, the events of that night replayed in Ethan's mind over and over. The Vazu had been powerful, far beyond anything Ethan had imagined. Yet the artifact's power had allowed him to fight back. But the creature's words haunted him. "The artifact was never meant for you. You are just a pawn in a game you don't understand." Those words echoed like a warning, and they gnawed at Ethan's thoughts. Growing louder with each passing hour, the days turned into weeks, and Ethan found himself unable to shake the feeling that something darker was on the horizon. The artifact's power was growing stronger, and with it, the pull of something he couldn't control. He spent hours meditating, trying to understand the connection between the artifact and himself. He could feel its pulse deep within his chest, like a heartbeat. It was as if it was calling him, urging him to embrace its full potential, yet every time he touched it, every time he gave in to its power, something inside him screamed in warning. The artifact wasn't just a tool. It was a force, a consciousness that had lived for millennia. And it was clear that it had plans for Ethan. But what were those plans? The answers weren't coming. Then, one day, as Ethan walked through the forest near his home, a strange sensation washed over him. It was subtle at first, a shift in the air, a sudden change in the way the trees swayed. It felt like the world itself was holding its breath. Ethan stopped, his senses on high alert. Something was coming, something that would change everything. Before he could react, a rumble shook the ground beneath him. The sky darkened and a heavy, oppressive silence descended. Ethan's heart raced as a massive shadow appeared above the trees. The ground trembled as if some great weight was descending from the heavens. Ethan looked up, his breath catching in his throat. An enormous ship, unlike anything he had ever seen, hovered above him. It was sleek and dark, with jagged edges and glowing red markings. It looked like it had come from the very depths of space. The air around it shimmered with unnatural energy. And then the ship spoke. Ethan, wielder of the artifact. The voice was cold and commanding, resonating in his mind like a deep, rumbling echo. It was not just a voice, it was a presence, one that filled every corner of his mind. Pressing down on his thoughts, he stumbled back, his heart pounding in his chest. From the ship, a figure descended slowly, its body cloaked in shadows. As it neared the ground, the figure's outline became clearer. It was tall, with smooth, reflective skin, and eyes that glowed a faint, unnatural green. There was an air of immense power around the figure, like it was something ancient, something beyond the understanding of any human. Ethan, the figure said again, stepping forward, its voice like 1,000 whispers. I am Korath, leader of the Kelder, a race older than your world. We have been watching you, and we know what you've awakened. Ethan's grip tightened around the weapon at his side, his instincts screaming that he wasn't safe. But he couldn't move. There was something about Korath, something that made Ethan's body freeze, even as his mind raced with questions. How did this creature know about him? How did it know about the artifact? Korath stepped closer, his eyes narrowing as he studied Ethan. You think you are in control of the artifact, but you are nothing more than a vessel, a puppet. You were never meant to wield such power. The artifact was meant to be in the hands of those who truly understand its purpose. Ethan swallowed hard, trying to steady his breath. What do you want with it? Why are you here? Korath's lips curled into a smile that was anything but reassuring. The artifact is part of something greater, something beyond your comprehension. You, human, are but a fleeting moment in time. The artifact was never yours to control. It was meant to be part of a greater whole, a key to unlocking the true potential of the Kelder race. A chill ran down Ethan's spine. He had felt the artifact's power, but he hadn't fully understood its significance. It wasn't just a weapon. It was a piece of a much larger puzzle, one that spanned across the stars and the ages. But why had it chosen him? Why was he, a mere human, the one who had awakened it? You don't understand, Korath continued, his voice now tinged with an eerie finality. You will never understand. The Kelder will rise again, and you will either stand with us, or you will be crushed beneath the weight of your own ignorance. Ethan's mind raced. His instincts screamed at him to fight, to unleash the full power of the artifact and stop Korath before it was too late. But something held him back. There was a depth to Korath's words, a weight to them that made Ethan hesitate. The artifact was powerful, yes, but its true purpose was still a mystery. Why me? Ethan asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. Why did the artifact choose me? Korath's eyes glowed brighter, and for a moment, it felt like the universe itself was folding around them. You are not the first, but you are the one who has come closest to unlocking the artifact's true potential. The others failed, as they always do. But you are different. You may be our greatest hope or our greatest downfall. Before Ethan could respond, Korath raised his hand, and the air around them seemed to thicken, like the very atmosphere was pressing in. The choice is yours, human. Join us, and together we can reshape the galaxy. Resist, and you will be nothing more than another casualty in the war that is about to begin. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. The weight of Korath's words, the gravity of the situation, pressed down on him like a storm. He didn't know what the right choice was. The artifact had given him power beyond anything he could have imagined. But now it seemed like that power came with consequences. How could he be sure that using it would be for the greater good? And if the Kelder were truly as powerful as Korath claimed, could he stop them? As Korath's figure loomed in front of him, Ethan felt a shift deep within himself. The artifact pulsed, stronger than ever. It wasn't just a weapon. It was a key to something far bigger than he could understand. And as the weight of the decision settled on him, Ethan realized that he was standing at the precipice of something that could change the fate of the galaxy forever. He had no choice but to make his move. The days that followed the arrival of Korath were a whirlwind of uncertainty and urgency. Ethan's mind was overwhelmed with questions, and his every instinct screamed for him to act. Korath's words, the promise of power, the chilling revelation of the Kelder's true intentions, it all seemed too much. Too heavy for one person to bear. But deep down, Ethan knew one thing. The galaxy's future was hanging in the balance, and he had no idea what part he was meant to play. The weight of the artifact's power had become both a gift and a curse. Ethan could feel it inside him, a constant hum of energy that pushed him forward, made him stronger, more aware. But it also came with a nagging sense of danger, as if the artifact was a door that, once fully opened, would reveal a power beyond comprehension. Korath's words echoed in his mind like a warning. You will either stand with us, or you will be crushed. He had never felt so alone. Every decision seemed to carry the weight of galaxies. The world outside his home had changed. No longer was it just a place of quiet routines. It had become a battlefield, a place where survival depended on who controlled the artifact and who didn't. And with the Kelder now hunting him, Ethan understood that there was no turning back. But there was something else in the air now, something different. It was subtle at first, a change in the winds, a ripple in the fabric of space itself. But it grew stronger with each passing day. Ethan could feel it, a disturbance in the very core of reality. The galaxy was shifting, and Ethan was at the heart of it all. One night, as the stars shone brightly above, Ethan ventured out once more, drawn by an invisible force. The artifact, now embedded within him, hummed louder as he neared the forest. He could feel the pull, as though it was guiding him to something or someone. The night was quiet, but the silence was charged with tension. Suddenly, a light flickered in the distance. It wasn't a natural light, it was artificial, mechanical, and it was approaching rapidly. Ethan's instincts kicked in, and he crouched low, hiding behind the trees. The light grew brighter, and the sound of engines roared in the distance. Whatever it was coming fast. Through the thick underbrush, Ethan caught sight of a large, hovering craft, sleek and black, moving through the trees with eerie silence. It was not Korath's ship, nor anything he had seen before. It had a different energy, a different feel, almost organic, as if it was alive. The craft came to a stop, hovering just above the ground. The hatch opened with a soft hiss, and out stepped a figure. The figure was human, or at least looked human, though there was something different about her. Her movements were fluid, almost inhuman, and her eyes glowed with a faint blue light, like the energy of the artifact. She stood tall, her silhouette framed against the dark night, and she exuded a sense of authority, of power. Ethan stepped forward cautiously, his hand resting on the weapon he had taken from the crash site. His heart pounded in his chest, and he knew, without a doubt, that this woman was here for a reason. She wasn't just a wanderer. She was someone important. Who are you? Ethan asked, his voice steady, though his mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. The woman turned toward him, and for a moment, her gaze seemed to pierce straight through him, as if she could see into his very soul. I am Lyra, and I've come for the artifact, she said, her voice calm, but laced with an undeniable force. The words struck Ethan like a blow. The artifact was no longer just a mystery. It was something others coveted, something that could change everything. Lyra's presence confirmed it. There were forces out there far greater than anything he had known. And they were all after the same thing. You're one of them, aren't you? Ethan asked, his hand tightening on the weapon. The Kelder? A spy sent to take the artifact. Lyra shook her head, her eyes never leaving his. I'm not one of them. I'm not your enemy, Ethan. I'm here to help you. Ethan's mind reeled. Help me. He laughed bitterly, shaking his head. How can you help me? I don't even know what's happening anymore. Lyra stepped closer, her movements almost graceful, like she was moving in slow motion. You've been chosen, Ethan, just like I was. We are both tied to the artifact, and its power is far beyond what either of us understands. But we can learn to control it together. Her words were like a lifeline, a hope he didn't know he needed. For the first time since his life had turned upside down, Ethan felt like someone else understood. But the unease still gnawed at him. Was this just another trap? Another false ally who would betray him when the time came? How do I know I can trust you? Ethan asked, narrowing his eyes. How do I know you're not just another Kelder agent trying to manipulate me? Lyra's face softened, and for the first time, a hint of vulnerability crossed her expression. I was once like you, she said, her voice quiet, almost melancholic. I was a regular human, living a simple life, until I was chosen. The artifact chose me, just as it chose you. But unlike you, I embraced it. I allowed the power to change me, and now I understand its true purpose. I know what it's capable of. But I also know that the Kelder are coming, and they will stop at nothing to take it from us. The weight of her words hit Ethan harder than he expected. He had been so focused on surviving, on controlling the power within him, that he hadn't considered the larger picture. The Kelder weren't just after him. They were after something bigger. They were after the power to reshape the galaxy itself. Ethan's mind raced. If what Lyra was saying was true, then the artifact wasn't just a weapon. It was a tool, a key to something far greater. But it was also a curse. The Kelder were relentless, and they would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. Lyra stepped forward, her eyes filled with a strange intensity. Ethan, you don't have to do this alone. Together, we can unlock the full potential of the artifact. We can fight back against the Kelder, but we must act fast. The galaxy is on the brink of war. The pull of the artifact surged within him, as if it was listening to her words. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. He could feel the weight of the decision bearing down on him. He was no longer just a man. He was something more, something that could shape the fate of the entire galaxy. The choice before him was clear, and there was no going back. With a deep breath, Ethan made his decision. All right, let's do this. As Lyra smiled, the tension in the air seemed to dissipate. Together, they would face the Kelder, and they would fight for the galaxy's future. But Ethan knew this was only the beginning. The true test was yet to come. The silence that followed Ethan's decision felt like the calm before a storm. As he stood beside Lyra, his mind buzzed with questions, but the weight of the moment held him in place. They had made a pact, a promise to each other and to the galaxy. But now, with the decision made, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were already too late. The Kelder were relentless, and the galaxy was on the edge of something far worse than he could imagine. Days passed in a blur. Lyra guided him, teaching him how to harness the power of the artifact more effectively. She spoke of its ancient origins, of the civilizations that had once wielded its power, and of the catastrophe that followed when they sought to control it. The artifact was a tool, yes, but it was also a weapon, one that could either save or destroy everything. Ethan listened, absorbing the lessons as quickly as he could, but a part of him remained suspicious. He trusted Lyra, but there was still a nagging doubt deep in his chest. He had seen how quickly everything could change, how his life had gone from ordinary to extraordinary. In a matter of days, could he really trust her? Or was this just another step in a much larger game, one that neither he nor Lyra fully understood? The moment of truth came faster than he expected. It was the middle of the night when the warning came. The ground trembled, a low rumble vibrating through the walls of the small hideout where Ethan and Lyra had been staying. The air felt charged, as though something monumental was approaching. Ethan shot to his feet, his heart pounding. He didn't need to ask what it was. He could already feel it in his bones. The Kelder were coming. Lyra moved quickly, her face set in grim determination. "We need to go, now." Ethan barely had time to process her words before the walls around them shook violently. Outside, the night sky was illuminated by the glow of multiple ships descending rapidly. The Kelder had arrived, and they weren't coming to talk. "Get ready," Lyra said, handing him a small device. "This will help you tap into the artifact's energy when you need it most. But remember, don't overdo it. The artifact's power is a double-edged sword. It can save you, but it can also consume you." Ethan nodded, his pulse quickening. He felt the familiar hum of energy rising within him, the artifact's presence stronger than ever. His mind began to race as the distant sound of alien engines roared closer. This was at the moment he had been training for. But even as he prepared for battle, doubts clouded his mind. What if they were too late? What if they couldn't stop the Kelder? "Let's move," Lyra urged, her voice cutting through his thoughts. They darted through the narrow hallways of their hideout and emerged into the open air. The ships above were enormous, their dark shapes blotting out the stars. Their engines hummed with a deep, otherworldly power that sent a shiver down Ethan's spine. The Kelder had arrived, and they weren't here to negotiate. They had come to finish what they started. Lyra's voice rang in his ears. "Stay close. I'll handle the initial strike. You focus on finding their weak points." Ethan nodded, his grip tightening on the weapon at his side. It wasn't much compared to the Kelder's advanced technology, but it was all he had. And with the artifact, maybe, just maybe, it would be enough. The first shot came from above, a blast of energy that tore through the air with a deafening roar. Ethan ducked instinctively, his heart racing as the ground around him exploded. He could see the Kelder soldiers dropping from the ships, their armored bodies encased in sleek, dark suits. They moved with terrifying precision, their weapons raised, their eyes glowing with that eerie violet light. Lyra didn't hesitate. She moved like lightning, her body a blur of motion as she engaged the nearest Kelder soldier. Ethan could hear the sound of their weapons clashing, the metallic screech of her energy blade meeting theirs. But even as Lyra fought with skill and precision, the Kelders seemed to be everywhere. They were relentless, powerful, almost too much for the two of them to handle. Ethan's mind raced. He could feel the artifact urging him to act, to embrace its full power. But something held him back. It was too dangerous. He had seen what happened to the ancient civilizations that tried to control it. They had destroyed themselves. But as the battle raged around him, something snapped inside him. The Kelder were here, and they would not stop until they had what they wanted. They would burn everything to the ground, and he couldn't let that happen. With a deep breath, Ethan stepped forward. He reached out with his mind, connecting with the artifact, feeling its energy surge through him. The power was like nothing he had ever felt, raw, uncontrollable, and overwhelming. For a moment, he felt as though he might lose himself to it. But he fought back the wave of darkness that threatened to swallow him whole. He wasn't going to make the same mistakes as those who had come before him. With a scream of fury, Ethan unleashed the artifact's power. A massive shockwave erupted from his body, sending the Kelder soldiers stumbling back. Their weapons faltered, their technology sparking and glitching under the intensity of the energy that Ethan had just released. The ground cracked beneath his feet as he pushed the power further, sending pulses of energy radiating outward. The Kelder soldiers tried to regroup, but they were no match for the raw force that Ethan commanded. His senses sharpened, his body moving faster than ever before. The world around him seemed to slow, and with each strike, he felled the Kelder one by one. Lyra stood beside him, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and fear as she watched Ethan in action. "You're doing it," she said, her voice tight. "But you need to control it. Don't let it consume you." But the power was intoxicating. It flowed through Ethan like a river, and as the Kelder forces faltered, he felt a surge of confidence. The artifact was his to command. He could win this, he could defeat them all. But as the battle raged on, Ethan realized something that chilled him to the core. The Kelder soldiers weren't just here for the artifact. They were after him. They knew what he was becoming. And as the first wave of soldiers fell, more ships appeared on the horizon. They had only just begun. Ethan's grip on the artifact tightened as the realization sank in. The true war was just starting, and this battle, however intense, was nothing compared to what was coming next. The Kelder were more than just an enemy, they were a force, a shadow that stretched across the galaxy, and Ethan was at the center of it all. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for the future of everything he held dear. And as the next wave of Kelder descended upon him, Ethan knew that he was ready to face whatever came next. He had no choice but to fight, and this time, he would fight with everything he had. The battlefield had become a storm of chaos. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, the surge of energy from the artifact coursing through him like wildfire. His senses were sharpened to the point where every movement felt deliberate, every breath an echo of his power. But despite the overwhelming sense of strength, the weight of what was happening pressed down on him like 1,000 tons. The Kelder were relentless, and they were not stopping. This was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a war that would determine the fate of the entire galaxy. The air was thick with the sound of explosions, the roar of weapons discharging, and the desperate cries of soldiers, both human and alien. Yet amidst the chaos, Ethan felt an unsettling calm. He could feel the artifact deep within him, its pulse a steady rhythm that matched his heartbeat. It was guiding him, pushing him forward, but it was also pulling him into something darker, something far more dangerous. Lyra fought beside him, her movements swift and deadly. The energy blade she wielded cut through the Kelder forces with precision, each strike more powerful than the last. She was a force in her own right, but even she seemed to be struggling against the sheer numbers of the Kelder. Their soldiers were unyielding, their ships overwhelming. No matter how many they defeated, more came, each wave stronger than the last. Ethan's grip tightened on the weapon at his side. He could feel the artifact's presence growing stronger with each passing moment. He had tapped into its power before, but this time, it felt different. It felt as though the artifact was no longer just a part of him, it was becoming him. Its energy was merging with his own, and Ethan could feel his body straining under the pressure. The power was intoxicating, like an endless flood of strength and knowledge. But there was a cost. You have to control it, Ethan. Lyra's voice snapped through the haze of battle, her words cutting through the fog in his mind. You're pushing yourself too far. But Ethan couldn't stop, not now. Not when the Kelder were so close to victory. He couldn't allow them to win. The galaxy was depending on him, on them, and he would not fail. With a shout, he called upon the full force of the artifact. A blinding wave of energy erupted from his body, cascading outwards like a tidal wave. The ground beneath him cracked, the air around him rippling with raw power. The Kelder soldiers faltered, their weapons sparking and malfunctioning under the intensity of the blast. But even as the wave of destruction swept across the battlefield, Ethan knew it was only temporary. He could feel that the artifact was not done yet. The power within him was still growing, pushing him to the edge of something beyond his control. Lyra staggered back, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and fear. "Ethan, stop!" she shouted, but her voice was lost in the deafening roar of the energy surging around them. "You're going too far." But Ethan couldn't hear her. The artifact had taken control, its energy flowing through him like a torrent. He could feel the Kelder forces crumbling before him, their ships disintegrating in the wake of his power. But with each victory, each fall of an enemy soldier, the artifact grew more insistent. It was calling to him, urging him to go further, to push beyond the limits of his human form. And for a moment, Ethan considered it. What if he could destroy them all? What if he could wipe out the entire Kelder fleet in a single stroke? End the war before it even began? He could feel the power at his fingertips, the weight of it threatening to shatter him, but also offering him something far more dangerous, absolute control. He could shape the galaxy. He could become a god. But as the thought crossed his mind, something inside him screamed in protest. It wasn't the artifact, it was something else, something human. His heart, his very soul, recoiled at the idea. The power was too great. If he gave in, if he let it consume him, there would be no coming back. He would become like the civilizations before him, destroyed by their own ambition. The thought jolted him back to reality. He clenched his fists, forcing himself to pull back, to take control. The artifact resisted, thrumming angrily within him, but he pushed it down, fighting to maintain his grip on himself. His body felt like it was on fire, but he couldn't stop now. "Ethan, listen to me. Lyra's voice cut through the haze once again, and this time, her words grounded him. The artifact chose you because you are human. Don't lose that. Don't lose yourself in the power. You're stronger than this. You are stronger than this. Her words struck him like a bolt of lightning. Human. That's what he was. Not a weapon. Not a god. Just a man, caught in the middle of a war far bigger than anything he could have imagined. But that was his strength. He wasn't like the Kelder or the ancient races who had sought the artifact. He still had a choice, and he could still decide who he wanted to be, with everything he had. Ethan shoved the artifact's power back, forcing it to recede into the depths of his mind. The battle around him began to quiet, the oppressive weight of the artifact's energy lifting. His body was still tense, his hands trembling, but the control was his again. For a moment, everything was still. The battlefield, the chaos, the roar of war, it all seemed to pause. And in that moment, Ethan realized the truth. This wasn't just about defeating the Kelder. It was about keeping his humanity, holding onto the very thing that made him who he was. As the stillness settled around him, Ethan turned his attention to the sky. More Kelder ships were approaching, but this time, he wasn't afraid. He had no illusions about what would come next. This battle wasn't over. The war wasn't over. But now, Ethan understood that the real fight was not just against the enemy, it was against the darkness. Within himself, Lyra moved beside him, her expression a mixture of relief and uncertainty. She had seen what he was capable of, and she knew as well as he did that the road ahead would be filled with challenges. But Ethan was no longer the same man who had stumbled into this war. He had found something more valuable than power. He had found purpose. The Kelder would come for him again. The artifact would call to him again. But Ethan was ready. He had learned to control the power inside him. And when the time came to fight again, he would do so with his humanity intact. Because, in the end, that was what made him the galaxy's mightiest warrior. Not the artifact, not the power, but the strength to choose who he would become.